Jerry, and I'll just be honest with you, like, because I've never felt like I quite fit. And I think that maybe a lot of entrepreneurs experience this because I hear this a lot from entrepreneurs. But like, I don't quite fit in. So because I don't quite fit in someplace, like I don't watch football, I can't hang, like most guys that I know that are your stereotypical guys, like, I mean, I'm polite, we're friendly, but it's like, I can't relate to them. I can't understand them. So I spend a lot of time trying to understand more categories of people. Understanding Gen Z, understanding millennials, understanding, I'm, Gen X, but understanding certain generations, understanding culture. Like with my company, we have people in 9 countries, and Pakistan, Philippines, South Africa, Ghana, Kenya, not Venezuela, El Salvador, here in Belize, US, Mexico, like all these different places, right? And it's like, I have to try to understand their way of life where they are and what their culture is in order to interact with them properly.
Welcome back again to another fantastic episode of the podcast. I have Dennis Meador here with me, and he has got a great story and a backstory, and he lives in Belize, so we want to get into that a little bit. Dennis is from the Legal Podcast Network, and with that said, let's just jump right in. Dennis, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Good to have you.
Great to be here. It's a nice day, probably just like where anybody in the U.S. is, 80 degrees, slight breeze, probably just like where whoever's listening to this, I imagine you have the same weather, so no big deal.
That is not a great way to start a podcast off in the middle of December for
winning friends and influencing people, my friend.
Yeah, for probably 90% of us here I'm just south of Nashville. We had an inch of rain in about 40 minutes this morning. It's still raining now, but it's going to be up over, 60, 65 before the day's out. So I can't complain. Where I'm from originally, Portland, Oregon, where I spent the first 50 years of my life, it's 35 degrees and it's been raining and there's storms and you can't get to the coast because the mountains are falling in, and you can't get to the middle of the state because the landslides. And so I live in paradise relative to where I lived originally, and you live in paradise, I think, relative to where I live right now.
Hey, it's all a matter of perspective, right? Like there's somebody out there living somewhere where I'm like, oh man, if I could live there. So, it is what it is.
Right. Let's talk about the background a little bit and your backstory. That really resonates with me, particularly when it comes to people who have started businesses, CEOs, entrepreneurs, and really kind of made something out of themselves that have an interesting background. So let's just start there and give us the, here we go. Here's the Oprah pitch. Who is Dennis Meador?
So I'm going to give as much of an abridged version as I can. The first 7 years of my life, my dad was in the Air Force. We moved a lot, traveled a lot, that sort of thing. I think I lived in 9 states by that time. And then at about 8 years old, my dad got out, we moved, and my parents got divorced. I stayed with my mother from 8 to about 13 years old. So somewhere around 4.5, 5 years, somewhere in there, 4 to 5 years. And my parents kind of just went the polar opposites. My dad got into church heavy and started, that life, especially towards, when I was a little bit older in that, like 12, 13. My mom, she started partying. It started on Friday night, then it was Friday, Saturday, then it was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then it was Thursday, then it was 7 days a week. She started dating like Gangsta Disciple gang leaders out of Chicago. The Gangsta Disciples are out of Chicago. He lived in that area. She started dating pimps, started dating crack dealers, started dating heroin dealers, married a pimp and crack dealer. Actually, I performed that wedding. That's a whole nother story in my adulthood. And, and also married a heroin dealer for a while he was out of Chicagoland as well. So as you can imagine during that period of my life, like our house was a drug house, a gang house. We had 3 drive-by shootings. Every day I would take a pyramid of cans, pyramid beer cans in the pale moonlight. There's no pale moonlight. This was not a romanticized thing. Every morning I would get up, and me and my sister would take all these cans, put them in a bag. We'd normally have 2, 3, 400, depending on how big the party was the night before. That's how me and my sister fed ourselves. So that's how I became aware. To me, food and sustenance and survival didn't happen externally at a very young age. It happened internally, and I had other people depending on me as well. My sister, sometimes even my mother in certain situations, depending on me during those 5 years. Then I moved in with my dad. He was kind of I went from like firmly in the lower class to being like at the bottom rung of the middle class now, still poor, but roof over our head, steady. It was a much more steady environment. And at 14 is when I started my first business. My stepbrother was about 2 years younger than me. His best friend on a snow day at school, we got up and we went out. I had a friend that made a bunch of money shoveling snow. So I went in and took my brother, my stepbrother and his best friend. We started knocking doors. We got, I don't know, maybe an hour into it. I think we'd done a couple of snow shoveling jobs. I had gotten both jobs. And we were rotating, taking turns. I can't remember exactly how we were doing it. It's been a couple days since that moment. And we ended up like getting to a point where my brother's best friend was like, I don't want to knock on the door. And then my brother was like, I don't want to knock on the door. So I was like, well, I'll go knock on the door, even though I just knocked and got us a job. So I go up. She says, oh, sure. Sweet little old lady hands me $20, 10 and 2 5s. I hand my brother 5, his best friend 5. I put 10 in my pocket and I say, okay, I've got a great idea, guys. Here's what we're going to do. You guys stay here and you shovel this walk. I'm going to go and keep knocking doors until I get another job. And then when you're finished, just walk down the block, meet me. I'll wait for you. And we'll just keep doing that. So where you guys never have to stop shoveling, I never have to stop getting business. And then we'll make more money this way. And they were like, wow, yeah, let's do that. So that kind of segued into snow shoveling. Then it turned into mowing lawns. Then it turned into raking leaves. Then it turned into running paper routes. And basically any of those jobs that a 15, 16-year-old boy down to like maybe 10, 11, 12 could do. I had the jobs in my neighborhood. I had a couple of other younger kids that did the jobs. And I manage the relationships. And that has kind of set the tone for my life. It's just like, I have the idea. I bring in people to execute the idea with me. And I oversee the execution of the idea. And that's really what's happened with this company. In 2 years, literally December 1st, 2023, my former partner sent me a letter that says, hey, I'm buying you out. We had a 5-year agreement. Okay, fine. So now here we are 2 years later. No company 2 years ago. 2 years later, we're approaching 200 clients and 60 people on the team.
That's I love every part of that. So let's dig into that a little bit more. You and I have a lot more in common in our backgrounds than I thought. When you are going through that with your mother and living that kind of life, for me, I was a street kid. I lived with hookers and heroin addicts in a $25 a week flop house when I was 17 years old. I got my first job as an 11-year-old. I paid taxes as an 11-year-old. 1980, I've never not paid taxes since. And people ask me, I've been shot, stabbed, beaten within an inch of my life more times than I can count. And they say, Jerry, how do you get out of that? And my answer is always, it was just my life. I was happy. I didn't know what unhappy was till you get to be a teenager. But when you're a kid, my little brother, I have a 22-month younger little brother, would steal food to eat. I have 8, there's 9 of us all together. I have 6 older brothers and sisters. And so life, they ate everything. And, but I until I got to be a teenager, I don't look back on it necessarily negatively. I am who I am, and I became who I became because of where I come from and in spite of where I come from. So that's my answer. Mm-hmm. What would your answer be, having kind of a similar background to the same question?
I mean, it would be a very close, you can't really see it here, but I have a few tattoos. Both of my arms are sleeved from like my shoulder to my wrist pretty much. And on one of them right here, real big on my forearm, I have embrace your journey. Yeah. Because I remind myself constantly, in order to get where I am, I had to be where I was.
Yeah.
Had I grown up in an environment where things were given to me, then I wouldn't have that innate ability to go out and take what's needed and what's wanted. Obviously, hopefully in the positive sense. But if I didn't have those moments of need and want, and then having to fulfill those moments for myself, for my sister, sometimes even my mother, if I didn't have those moments that just taught me a baseline of just life skills that most people don't gain until their 20s. Probably you and I are the same in that we had, like you said, 11 years old. We had life skills most people don't have until they're double or triple our age. And so, and again, I don't know what yours is like, but for me, around 15, I got into church real heavy when I moved in with my dad. So I moved in a year or two later, got like real focused on it, so that by 16, I was doing most of the speaking for the teenagers in my church. By 18, I was a pastor. By 19, I was married. So I went a little bit different off. It was like every little crack of a door that I saw to get out of my situation, because I was also very different in that I knew I was poor, and I hated being poor. I hated being dirty. And maybe that was because for my first 7 years, we lived on the base. We had a pretty good standard of living. But then when you go from that to where I remember one night, and I haven't told this story before, but my mom, being in the types of relationships she was in, sometimes they would get into very heated discussions that would include more things than just them talking. And so many times, 2, 3 in the morning, I would have to gather my mom crying and bruised and my sister and try to find a place. And I usually had 2 or 3 places around where I knew I could take them for safety. Well, I remember we had tried these places, people were out of town, and we had this one person that we knew, and we knew that they were like even poorer than us, And I remember lying on like a cot, and I remember just like roaches and mice literally crawling on my chest. I'm like 10, 11 years old now. And I remember at that moment just saying in my head, and I looked at my sister because I saw the same things, and I couldn't sleep because I was like flicking stuff off of my little sister. And so as I'm flicking stuff off my sister, I can't tell you the number of times from 8 to 13 I said, when I grow up, I will never be in a situation like this. My children will never be in a situation like this, because I do not want this for myself and whoever is around me. So I was a little bit different in a mind frame because I had had that exposure in the first part of my life. When it hit me, that little chapter in the middle there, it hit pretty hard because of the contrast of what I had had before.
Yeah, I think that's related. It hit me as a teenager, but my thing, I went to church starting at 6 years old. We started in a non-denominational church. This is in the, like I said, the early to mid 70s. And it was fairly abusive. The school was fairly abusive, but I have these great memories. Last time I was in a church was at 16 years old. But I have friendships that I've made and things that I have kept. But it's kind of the same in that I remember saying to myself, laying hungry in bed, I'm probably 11 or 12. When I get old enough, I'm going to have a box of Hostess blackberry fruit pies at my beck and call. I'm going to be rich enough that I can have a box, not one, but a box of Hostess blackberry fruit pies, and I'm going to eat them whenever I want. To me, as an 11 or 12-year-old, that was rich.
I remember thinking, I'm going to have so many clothes, because I would usually have about 1 or 2 outfits, and then we would move in the midst of a night and start over somewhere, so I'd usually have like about a small box of stuff. And I remember thinking, when I get older, and this is right before I moved in with my dad, I remember thinking, one day I'm going to have so many clothes that are nice that need to be on hangers that I'm going to have a whole closet filled with clothes one day.
Yeah.
And it's like things that, like you said, blackberry pie. It's like most people are like, hey, that's a $30 fix. Sure, I could go to someplace and fill up a closet for a few $100 if I wanted to. But at that time in our mind, it just was like the ultimate luxury to be able to do that. So does that mean if you pull open one of the drawers at the desk you're at right now, are there blueberry pies or blackberry pies in the desk?
No. But I should, just as kind of, as an homage back to that, 11-year-old Jerry laying in bed, I should at least get a box that says Hostess fruit pie. That's not a bad idea, actually. That's
and you know what I'll do? Every once in a while on a podcast, I'll have someone shoot at me through my windows as an homage to my.
That'll keep you on your toes.
Yeah.
I to that end, I was just talking yesterday on a podcast, and I said to him that again, I am who I am in spite of where I come from, and also because of it. But one of my superpowers, having done the things that I've done in the business community, has been the fact that I have perspective. I do not forget where I come from. And so
Right.
I have been fabulously rich, and I have lost probably more money than I have made over the last 25, 30 years. And so those pitfalls, those highs and those lows, the risk that it takes to do business at that level, the sacrifice, all of those things. Over time, I suppose one of the things that I most appreciate is people tend to marvel and or not understand, how can you put up with the lifestyle that you have? How can you put up with the kind of risks that you have taken over the years? And I always deal with, the stuff that comes your way running businesses. And I always say, compared to stealing food to eat,
Yep.
this is nothing. And I think we forget where we come from, particularly when we have difficult backgrounds. And I've really, and the older I get, I'm 56, I embrace it more and more. And so that's a superpower to me, is not forgetting where I come from. It keeps me humble, it keeps me in check. But at the same time, man, I know what hard time, I know what poor looks like, and it doesn't scare me.
Well, and it's the same. I think that when people who have success come from a place where there wasn't a foundation of success to build on, whatever that means, whether it was upper middle income going into college, whether it was whatever it was. When people have success without that jump start in life, they often become much more empathetic to people who, like, I'm one of those people, and I'm going to guess that you are too, Jerry. I pretty much can have a conversation with anybody that I just meet.
Sure.
You know, and, have a meaningful conversation, not, well, how's the weather? How's the day treating you, my friend? But like literally within just like less than 10 seconds, I'll be talking to somebody and we'll be talking about like their mother dying, or, like it's just like almost instantaneous. And I think that's because when I talk to people, hopefully they can sense that, hey, this person actually is listening to me and actually cares. This person isn't just coming up on the surface. And again, I think that's because we've just been forced. Like, I don't know what prostitutes are. In my head, prostitute isn't a subcategory of humanity, or drug dealer isn't a subcategory of humanity. These are just people that were in certain situations that were trying to survive, whether it was survive for the day to get a fix, survive for the week to get a roof over their head, survive for the month to take care of somebody else. Whatever it is, they're doing what they need to do to survive in the moment. And so for me, I've always been able to kind of, as a leader, relate to anybody on any scale in any part of my business. And I think that our sort of background lends to that. It's kind of funny. I have people ask me sometimes, because, and I bet you get this too, Jerry, you should write a book, right? Except for now it's like, oh, you're always podcasting. I don't need you to write a book, but they'll be like, well, you should write a book. And I have like kind of two working titles. The first one is Daddy's a Preacher, Mama's a Prostitute. I feel like that would cut through, quite a bit. But the other working title for my life is Natural Born, Trauma Built. And I think that when you combine natural ability, I was talkative and outgoing and figuring out ways to make money before the trauma period of my life. So, coming out, so like having natural ability and then having trauma on top of it, it's kind of like the nature versus nurture. But what happens when you have nature and nurture combining? And that's what I look at it as, is it's like, I have this innate ability as a leader and a communicator. I've always had it. But what the trauma period of my life and the hard periods of my life taught me is, that yes, you have these talent sets, but here's how you need to apply them. They can be used to help you. They can be used to help others, or both, or, whatever. So that's certainly one of the things that I've noticed with people that have come through hard times, is they have that empathy, but it's, it's a combination of who they are and what they've been through. And that makes them what they are today.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I don't know how much writing you've done, just like you. I have a couple of books sitting right here next to me that people have bought me for Christmas that have a name on the back of it that's empty. Right, so there's no words in it. For me, you got to write your book. Get started.
Right.
Here's a gift to get started. And I already have the name of my book, and I say this somewhat tongue in cheek, but I would probably do it, which is There Used to Be High Dives. That's
okay.
That's be the name of my book, and the point of that is a seminal moment for me as a child was climbing up on that big high dive that they used to have right at all of the local public pools. For me, that was an escape, a therapy. The public pool was the greatest place in the world in the summertime in Portland, Oregon. And I can remember, once you go up that high dive, there's people behind you. You can't really go back down. And maybe I'm 6 or 7 years old, and it's a lot higher when you're up there. And ultimately, you jump. And when you jump, you realize you're not going to die, but you were sure you were going to die when you were up there. And you have all the peer pressure pushing you up, and it's just, I don't know. For me, it's a lesson on ultimately what life turned out to be. But more specifically, to your point, when you have lived among those people and you have a sense of what they are, if you can look at them with any amount of sympathy, I suppose, you gain that empathy. I know that Pretty Woman is not what a prostitute is. The movie Pretty Woman. Right. I know. I saw them coming home as I was leaving for work at 17 years old, and the heroin junkies that are in the middle of this place that I was living, and I saw what the women look like, and I saw them carry them out of there in many cases, and those women are broken. I feel the same way about OnlyFans today and the massive pornography and Instagram and what girls are doing to themselves there, because I see the same thing. You can put on all the makeup and put on all the smiles and act as tough and as strong as you want to act and tough. But I've seen what that looks like. And so I think it goes one of two ways. I think you can be very jaded. I've seen murders in my time. I saw multiple suicides in my lifetime. And it can harden you. But at the same time, I was able to keep some I don't know what I was able to keep some level of humanity, even having gone through all that. And as an adult, when I was a kid, I spent a little bit of time in the hole. But as an adult, I was able to keep myself out of jail and keep myself out of trouble, I think, because I had a little bit of spark of humanity that growing up like that can take out of you.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I think that for, like you said, being able to come out of that sort of situation with all of your humanity intact is probably one of the key factors of why people do come out of those situations.
Yeah.
Because when you succumb to the atmosphere of what's going on around, I remember thinking at 11 years old, I think it was 11 years old. This is the only time that I drank alcohol until I was 36. At 11 years old, my mom got me a 2-liter of Purple Passion. I don't know if you remember that, but that had like Everclear. It was like grape soda with Everclear in it.
Ugh.
So my mom got me a 2-liter of Purple Passion, and I drank that and a couple of rum and cokes, and way more than you should be drinking the first time at 11 years old, period. Well, shouldn't be drinking any, but you get my point. And I remember thinking like a day or two later, because also I was getting a little older, and some of the women that were around my mom would come on to me, but I didn't really understand what they were doing until I got older and looked back, and I'm like, yeah, it's probably not normal for a 22-year-old woman to get on top of an 11-year-old boy and shake and move and laugh and blow weed into his face so that he gets high. That's probably not a normal thing. But coming out of that sort of situation and going back and just being these are just people who I have not met a person in my life that has never experienced pain, that has never experienced disappointment, that has never had to do something they didn't want to do in a moment. And whether that was just act a certain way or commit something illegal is not the point. But at the end of the day, all of the human experience is the same. It's just varying degrees of the different things that we experience. We all experience trauma, We all experience pain. We all experience heartbreak. We all experience these things. It's just the varying degrees that we have them in. So instead of being like, okay, well, I see your pain. I see what you're going through. I know that hurts. I can certainly empathize because I've been through something parallel to that. What can I do to help? We're just like, oh, you know what? Look at that drug addict on the side of the road crying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's same person, but one says there's a human in hurting, and one says there's something less than human that's inconveniencing me in the moment by showing emotion that I don't want to deal with.
Yeah, to that end, it's a good word. It's the right word to use. I struggle with the word trauma today, because words don't have meaning anymore compared to, I don't know how old you are, but again, I'm 57, so I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, and these words, one person's trauma is they got called a name in the 6th grade and they remember it all these years later. Another person's trauma is they got thrown in a locker, right, when they were in high school, and that's their trauma today, and the kids are mean to them. And I mean, these words, trauma for you, trauma for me, trauma for a whole lot of other people. I mean, there's, sex trafficking of children in the United States is, 300,000 kids, and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Compared to that, what is your trauma, right? So it's almost like we need trauma 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 or something, right? We need some idea go ahead.
My thought is this, and somebody pointed this out to me because I used to be the same way. I used to think exactly what you're thinking. And I'm not saying that where I'm thinking now is the place you need to arrive someday, because I'm on a journey just like you are, right? So I don't know where I'm going to arrive. So I'm careful to not say where I am currently is the final station. But if you think about it, and this is what somebody gave me an illustration as, let's say you've never been hurt before. You've lived a pretty easy life, and I walk up and I pinch you. I pinch you hard. It causes maybe a little bruise, but nothing more than that. You're still going to say, ow, and remember that. Now, on the same token, somebody else who's maybe lived a harder life, if I come up and pinch them, they're just going to turn around and be like, what are you doing? But that person, I might have to freaking take a machete and hack off their arm to get the same reaction. So the reaction level is based on experience.
Sure.
So to the person who gets pinched, the pinch is a 10 if that's the worst thing they've ever experienced. But the person who got their arm chopped off, it wasn't until that point that it became a 10. So just because you and I have callous souls, and I don't mean that negatively, but I just mean in dealing with hard times, it takes somebody figuratively taking a machete to our soul and chopping off our arm for us really to feel it. You were talking earlier about people were like, how can you deal with this tragedy of business and ups and downs? It's like, when you've dealt with life and death, what the fuck does money matter?
Right.
And I'm sorry, if you don't cuss on your show, just beat me out,
right.
And I won't do it anymore.
No, you're fine.
But you see my point?
Yeah.
You've literally seen, like you said, people dying. I've seen people beat. I've seen people raped. I've seen people, I haven't seen murder or death to my face, but I have seen the precursor to it for sure.
Yeah. I don't think we disagree on that. I think where my disagreement comes in, or where my thought process goes, is the person getting the pinch for the first time. Society teaches us today that pinch is the same as my experience or the same as your experience. And what I want people to hear through this podcast and what we're doing is that there is a perspective to it, and not everything is a 10. In fact, if you just get outside of your bubble a little bit, there's a lot to learn about what you're capable of, simply because you don't take small things and make them a 10. Just because it's a 10 in your life, the lesson is just because it's a 10 in your life may not mean it's a 10. And if it's not a 10, then what are you capable of doing? Because if you think all things are a 10, it's very hard from my perspective for you to move past that.
I mean, that's true. It's kind of like when we're kids and our mom's like, kids in Africa are dealing. It's like, I used to think about that. I used to be like, how can I complain? I haven't starved to death. I personally haven't been mishandled, sexually, physically, fighting and being beat up and stuff like that. But like, I haven't experienced the depths of like pain and sorrow that humanity on the planet right now, in other places, and even in our own country, experience. So like you were saying, their 10 is your 2. Yeah, but your 10 is the other person's 2. So I think like I understand your point, but at the same time, and maybe this is just because like my 3 kids, they're all Gen Z, 25, 23, 24, and 20. And it's been a challenge for me because I'm like, are you kidding me right now? Like, I work my butt off so you could live in nice neighborhoods and nice towns, go to nice places, have clothes, not have to worry about food, not have to worry about anything I worried about as a kid. And now you're getting out and coming back, and we're sitting down and talking about how when you were this age, I did this one thing, and like you said, this what to me would be a small thing, but to them it was an experience that it affected them for more than just that moment. And so I had to step back and go, okay, if my life like experience is different than their life experience, we'll just go back 1 or 2 generations from us, constantly on the edge of starvation, constantly on the, they're dirty, and so again, the comparison, I've just found myself in life, Jerry, and I'll just be honest with you, like, because I've never felt like I quite fit. And I think that maybe a lot of entrepreneurs experience this because I hear this a lot from entrepreneurs. But like, I don't quite fit in. So because I don't quite fit in someplace, like I don't watch football, I can't hang, like most guys that I know that are your stereotypical guys, like, I mean, I'm polite, we're friendly, but it's like, I can't relate to them. I can't understand them. So I spend a lot of time trying to understand more categories of people, understanding Gen Z, understanding millennials, I'm, Gen X, but understanding certain generations, understanding culture. Like with my company, we have people in 9 countries, and Pakistan, Philippines, South Africa, Ghana, Kenya, not Venezuela, El Salvador, here in Belize, U.S., Mexico, like all these different places, right? And it's like, I have to try to understand their way of life where they are and what their culture is in order to interact with them properly. And that's how I've approached millennials, because I remember as Gen X, when millennials came up, oh, the worst generation in history, these people are going to ruin our American society. Well, I feel like we're hearing that again, are we not, with Gen Z? It's just like, not exactly, but, in many ways, people are just like, oh, this is terrible. And it's like, are we trying to understand them? Or are we trying to alienate ourselves from them by refusing to understand them?
Yeah, and what a great conversation. This is fantastic. That is just really good conversation here. I'm enjoying this a lot. I think this is important, and this is right along the lines of what I try to preach, in particular to the young people, because yes, I get that understanding, but Western society, I think, my take on this, has pushed. In every other society, for the most part, the elders are the ones that you want to listen to. I am where I am because I joined a peer-to-peer group when I was 30 years old, and the first business I did, we did $4 million, then $8 million, then $12 million, then $14 million, but I had no idea what I was doing, and I joined a peer-to-peer group. I didn't even know what that was. This is 25 years ago, and it was full of guys that were in their 50s that had a whole bunch of experience. Their businesses may not have been as big as mine was, but they had a ton of experience. And I think that Western society, as every generation comes through, pushes out that society of elders or the people that have been there. We see this on social media all the time, the 25-year-old that takes a picture of himself in front of the Lamborghini. And the reality is that my children don't have a whole lot. My kids are 28, 25, and 24, 26 and 24. But they don't have, they're starting to get life experience. But they don't really know that much. They don't really. Their hard drive is not full enough. You haven't really lived until you've been 40. Until you've lived 40 years on this earth. That was a piece of advice that I was given as a kid that I hated, but as I grew older, I found to be absolutely true. The hard drive just does not have enough information in it. I guess my point is that yes, you want to understand the times in which you live, but at the same time, there is a lot. When we start listening to the youth, then that's where we're going to get into trouble. And the youth are so empowered today, and the adults in the room, let's say the elders in the room, have been ostracized almost at the altar of youth and vitality and beauty and narcissism and riches, things of that nature, and fake lifestyles and the social media lifestyle. That I think the voice of the elders need to come back in and give life some perspective. So I think I agree with you in the extent that I know what my kids do. I know what they like. I know what the world's like today. I know what technology is. I know what they're facing. I know what they're dealing with. I know what the world looks like. But at the same way, I have a perspective as a Gen Xer that lived right in the middle of it that says, we need to add perspective to the world a little bit, and that's being ignored.
Well, and I agree with that, but I think that comes back to the concept that I talk about a lot, which is digital languages. And so we used to worship youth, in my opinion. Now we worship technology, and it's youth that applies it better. So in my opinion, just in my lifetime, the way I've seen older people treated, when you go into technology, that seems, in my opinion, to be the great evener. And if you can learn to speak the digital languages, then you can have your voice amplified regardless of age, and you can be respected. What earns respect now is different, though. We used to respect experience. Young people respect views. I can't tell you how many times I've been meet somebody relatively young, and they're just treat me some some old white guy, which is fine. I understand, that's what I am, right? But we'll be talking, and I'm like, oh yeah, I have an Instagram. I'm like, oh really? And I'll be like, and I was one of the first foodie Instagrammers in Austin. So I built I had 35,000 Austin followers. I'm probably 12 because I got rid of a bunch of people through the years. But they'll follow me and they'll be like, oh, you have 12,000. Oh, so what do you do? All of a sudden that attention shifts from old white guy to, oh, he's a digital man. So again, it's just my experience. It's to me, it's more an issue of language than culture. And it's more an issue of if I understand what's important to you and I understand what's important to me, then what I need to do is find some place in the middle where we're both happy. But if I don't know what's important to you and I just want you to know what's important to me, they're going to resist, and I'm just going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing and getting nowhere, really. Yeah. And so it's when we start to be able, and again, this kind of boils down to me traveling so much. When you first get to a place, I lived in Romania in my early 20s. I built a business, it went well, and I managed it from there with my partner managing the day-to-day. And I remember moving to Romania in my early 20s, and I remember for the first months, it was just the first couple weeks was nice and I live in a foreign country, I'm building a house, this is great. But it was Romanian was just being spoken around me constantly. And I had no idea. I had no exposure to languages growing up. I'm an American. If they're smart enough, they'll learn how to speak English, right? That was kind of my mind frame at the time. But as I started learning the language and understanding what was going on around me, at first I understood them. And after I understood them, then I could have a conversation with them. And that's what I try to do with anybody in any station, is, okay, let me understand them. Now that I understand them in their language, now I can converse with them, whatever that language is. So that's what I've tried to do.
I think that's a great segue into talking about the legal podcast network and what you're doing there, digital and communication, because that's what we're talking about. So let's get into that for our last few minutes here and kind of talk about, it looks like you built the network around legal podcasts. And for lawyers in particular, having dealt with lawyers my entire life, how can I put this eloquently? They're not.
I'm pretty sure I could quote you, but go ahead.
I can't imagine sitting around listening to a lawyer talk for an hour. So that's somewhat tongue-in-cheek. But yeah, talk to me about, maybe that's the point of the network, is to help to bring that out of people, because I think, socially there is this idea of what attorneys are about. And is that the point, is to try to not only get the word out there, but kind of expose them to dealing with this new media?
Though what you just said are really byproducts of what we're ultimately trying to do. What we're ultimately trying to do is restore authority to the knowledge worker, starting with the legal field. So you think about 20 years ago, it was doctors and lawyers. Be a doctor, be a lawyer. Like when you grow up, you want to be a doctor or a lawyer. Oh, his son's a doctor or his daughter's a lawyer. Like doctors and lawyers is what we pointed out. But that's not the case anymore. Just in our lifetime, the legal industry has gone from be a lawyer, be a doctor, don't question, just, whatever, to like now we have the highest concentration of lawyers anywhere in the world, in our country. So it's the most competitive landscape. We're one of the few countries, although there's a law just coming out in California, I'm in the middle of researching to just make sure what we're doing, but like authority has been lost. And what people call attorneys for now, especially if they're consumer facing, literally the first thing they ask them, how much? Literally. I'm getting a divorce. How much? I got a DUI. How much? And it's created this dynamic for attorneys who've gone to school for what, like 8 years? And then, they've done all this work to be this like societal step up. And because of the commoditization of the internet through things like Google and other directory types of approaches, now it's just A to Z, or, however you want to list these attorneys. It's just attorney after attorney after attorney after attorney. Oh, we'll get a website. Guess what? They all have websites. And they say, I went to school. I handle this. So if I have a criminal case and I need an attorney, I start calling all of these attorneys. They all appear the same to me. There's no differentiation. So what we do is we take one attorney per practice area, per market, so criminal in Dallas, DFW. And we say, okay, you're our criminal defense attorney for the DFW market. These are the 3 counties, the 5 counties, whatever, depending on population density, things like that. Here's the counties that you cover. And you're going to be the only criminal defense attorney. And what we do is we do what we call authority podcasts. So it's not like what you and I are doing, sitting around kind of feeling out subjects, seeing where it goes. It's what we call authority podcasts. And essentially what we do is when they onboard, we figure out who is their client. Not just what types of cases, but what is the archetype? So I say I want divorce cases, but do I want like custody? Do I want, like a lot of assets? Do I hate a bunch of assets in custody? I want something a little cleaner to make less money, more volume. Like there's all kinds of micro niches within each niche of business, right? And so what we do is we create the questions, we provide them with the host, we provide them with the producer, and we get in and it's just like, we use professional podcasters, 10, 12, 15 years of podcasting or radio hosting, things like that. The attorney gets on and they're like, and we list it as the co-host of that particular show for the lawyer. So it's like a turnkey podcast. They just literally show up. We've sent them the questions a week ahead of time if they want to prep. And then we just go, it's about a 20-minute podcast. Hey, attorney, if I'm this, what happens if this happens? Now, I read this law, and I see this all the time. So it's basically we're researching and using psychological profiles and archetypes because I've worked with attorneys for 20-something years. I have other people on my team that have worked with attorneys a number of years. My content team does a great job with that. So we come in, they literally just show up and talk. They talk for an hour, 2 episodes, or 2 hours, 4 episodes every month, depending on, how often their show goes out. So then it's not just having a podcast, though. The podcast, Jerry, it's just the centerpiece of an ecosystem. So we take the podcast and we divide it up into content. We produce 30 pieces of content for every show we do. So if you do one podcast a month, we're going to be able to post on all your social media outlets for the entire month with 30 minutes of time. So we're filling up all their social media profiles with good custom content, primarily video and educational. And so now what's happening is, let's say that I'm in Dallas and, I need a criminal attorney. I'm on my third DUI. And I'm like, well, man, am I going to go to jail or what? So I type in, just got my third DUI. Will my license be revoked or I go to prison? And then all of a sudden it pops up this YouTube podcast or it pops up this other podcast and it says, 10 minutes, 15, 20 minutes. I can listen to this podcast. It's a whole episode, third DUIs in Texas. Mm-hmm. Now, I listen to that and I'm like, man, this attorney seems to know what they're doing. And I go to their website. I see they've got more videos. They've got a podcast. They've got FAQ pages. They've got all this stuff to help me in this moment of confusion, frustration, fear, to help me have clarity, to help me have comfort, to help me have a sense of direction. So if you've given me all those things, now I'm no longer judging my attorneys solely on their cost. I'm judging the attorney on my connection to them. And when I go with a connection, my first question isn't how much, it's what is it going to cost me to be able to work with you? And that's a very different question, although on its surface, it sounds pretty much the same. So that's what we're trying to do on top. So we call it an ecosystem. It's not just have a podcast. It's take this podcast, let us build this ecosystem with your social media posts, with your website content. We're doing podcast matching in Q1, and we're launching 2 streaming networks like Netflix, but for the legal field, where you can watch it on your television, download it through Amazon, Roku, whatever, all the different television sets and all of that. So we're trying to create something where we're taking 30 minutes of an attorney's time, 20 minutes, whatever, and we're multiplying it. Why? Because they don't have a lot of time. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to take a lot of time. And traditionally, what has marketing been? Marketing's been, here's $500, graphic artist puts a thing together, and then we go pay somebody to put it on some sort of traffic flow. Now, marketing is, let's take you at the center, do a personal brand around you, Mr. Attorney, Mr. Insurance Agent, Mr. Real Estate Agent, whoever you are. Let's build the brand around who you are, because ultimately, that's who people buy when they buy knowledge products. They don't buy systems, they buy people. They buy personality. They buy comfort. They buy humanity. And why is that? People expect humanity in their purchases. Why is that? Because we know more about the 5 people we follow online the most than we do about our own neighbors. So our universe and our reality for the vast majority of people is happening in this box, this phone, this wherever you're at right now. This is where our social life is. I live on a freaking island, and sure, I have friends and people that come and visit and friends on the island, but do you know how many digital friends I have? Hundreds of them all over the world. Sure. That I've never even met. One guy, I just saw this yesterday. My first LinkedIn connection was in 2007. It was to an individual named Randy Revore. Randy Revore recruited me into legal marketing like 2 years before that. Randy Revore and I have had businesses together, small ones. He's worked for me. I've worked for him. Right now, he's on my team. He's been with me for about a year now. He's one of my sales guys. And we've worked together off and on for well over 20 years. And the reality is we have met one time in 20-something years.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And that's the world we live in.
Yeah.
And so we're just trying to take what's happening offline for the attorneys online, because I have not met one single attorney that didn't tell me something like this. If I could just get them across from me, I'm going to convert them at 80%. Mm-hmm. But yet, in a day and age where people want to connect with you before they ever, come in contact with you, I like that. People want to connect with you before they ever come into contact with you. There's an expectation of connection.
Yeah.
That is the expectation that people have. So we are merely trying to cultivate in a very low friction way for our clients. And we're starting the Expert Podcast Network and the Authority Podcast Network in Q1 as well. We got a ton of stuff coming. So but building that authority before they ever come in through things like a podcast, through things like video, through things like FAQ, through things like site content, through things like, and guess what? The GPT and LLM models, they are based off of query-based content. So if I create my content query-based right now, I'm not only benefiting in the present by getting cited and giving people what they want, but I'm benefiting for the future when the LLMs are the primary mode of search and questions.
Right.
And so we're trying to future-proof while present-proofing, while it's just there's a lot of stuff, but we try to keep it super simple for our clients. But like me, my brain is running 24/7 figuring out, okay, how can I be better? How can we get this? Oh, we're having problems here. How can we do this? Right now, we're trying to decide, are we going to open up our own division to help people create podcast studios and visuals? Or are we going to bring in a contractor and have them do it that are already doing something like that? That's the constant types of discussions we have in helping our clients. We want to create an ecosystem, not a marketing product. We want people to be like, you're not in that ecosystem? Man, if you can get in there, if your area is available, you need to get, oh, look, I see they have your spot. You need to get in this. Everybody I know that does this does really well, gets clients, gets the right type of clients. They don't have to argue. They don't have to talk about price. So you need to be a part of that. That's my desire.
So to that end, my last question for you, and this dovetails in perfectly, that I like the sound of all of that. The issue that I find in podcasts, authority podcasts in particular, is that as someone who has built, bought, and sold a dozen businesses and done hundreds of millions of dollars over the last 25 years, I know a lot of stuff about a lot of things, right? I've had a lot of experience in every kind of, in every direction. And so I kind of can hear the BS when it's being spun. And I go, well, that's just not true. And it's not true because I've lived that, or I've lived it through one of my clients, or I've lived it through with one of the 1,000 millionaire entrepreneurs that I know. So how do you separate building the trust and that authority without feeling like you're just making content, I suppose? Because a lot of things that I hear that I can't even get through and I just shut off is that somebody read something. That's somebody watched something and then they're regurgitating it. That's not somebody who has lived it. That's somebody who's educated, possibly, who read that in a book and now is giving his opinion based on what the book told him. But those of us on the ground know that that's really not reality. So I'm looking for that authority figure that actually has that experience. So how do you cross that bridge, I suppose? How do you make it so that is an authority figure without turning out content for the sake of content, I suppose?
Based on the QAs and the content plans that we do. So, for example, I used one 20-minute podcast could just be about a third DUI. What does that also mean? One podcast could be, hey, you just got your first DUI. Oops, I did it again. DUI edition. The second podcast, third, and then 4+. Hey, you're going to jail. You're in trouble. But the point is, these things, the good thing about content, especially legal content, but really any sort of knowledge content that has application to people's lives. So your mortgage, that applies to people's lives, but it's knowledge. You're a realtor, that's knowledge. You're a insurance agent. You're whatever it is that you do. You're a lawyer, right? When you are using knowledge, the easiest thing to do is just emulate a session with a potential client. Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do. That's why we say, we're listen, we provide the host, here's the questions we're going to ask you. And all of these questions are research questions based either on, like I said, psychological profiles of their client archetype, or search data that we've seen, or our own bank of content that we've cultivated through the years that we know works for certain things and cultivating certain cases. So we're not just getting up and being let's talk about the strangest laws, you know what I mean, in the state. Maybe that would be a funny one to do if you had some funny ones lined up. But the people that are listening to these podcasts, the other thing you got to understand, these lawyers aren't trying to monetize their traffic flow. So they're playing a different game than you and I. They would rather have 50 local people watch their content and get 5 cases out of it than they would 50,000 people outside of their market watch it, and they just have. So they're playing a different game than most podcasters. And the people that benefit the most from authority podcasting are that person. They're the people who, listen, if I podcast all year long, I do an hour every week, and I get 1 or 2 clients, my ROI is a 10x. Or a 20x or a 30. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's what you want. You're not trying to get 22 cents per view from this outlet or that outlet. You're trying to get a handful of clients each month. So these podcasts are designed for a specific person at a specific time in their life to help them in that moment. And when I help you and you're going, oh man, am I going to jail? Oh, the third one. Okay. Never get another one. I get it. He's made that clear in that podcast. But now I know, like, I'm not going to jail. I am going to probably have like a $5,000 to $7,000 fine. But you know what? I've got that one little savings account. I could probably do that. So you see what I'm saying? Like now they've formed a way forward because of information. Now let me ask you this question. If in your opinion, I just saved your life, in essence, for being in jail, or at least told you you're not going to jail, there's going to be an affinity there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
So that's why we do it that way, because it's not about personality. It's about a certain time, a certain issue, and the certain person that can help with that certain problem at that time.
Yeah, that's I can see that. And keeping it short and succinct and one topic, one subject, like you're talking about, drunk driving third time, makes it easier to build that authority, if you will. Particularly, you're dealing with experienced attorneys whose job it is to get people out of these situations and understand the system and how it works. Yeah,
absolutely.
That makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This is fantastic. I appreciate it. Again, we spent a bunch of time on the background, not so much time talking about your current business, or I wanted to get to Belize, but these hours go by quick when you find somebody that particularly you got something in common with and an interesting background. So I appreciate you taking time and running through that. I think a lot of people hopefully take some inspiration out of your background and where you come from, and that you're here standing upright and, not in a gutter yourself like so many of the people around us that we grew up with.
Yeah, exactly. And, sometimes I'll go back to my old neighborhood. And there's a couple of kids like across from, so I lived on this one corner. And this is kind of like a formative time. I had a lot of friends and a lot of really hard stuff happened in this one house. I mean, we might have only lived there 3 months, but to me, it felt like 3 years. Yeah. But every once in a while, I'll go back and I'll see like catty corner. There's like 3 brothers, one that was like a little older than me, one that was just a little younger than me. And then they had a little brother. And, we'd all play, sports in the street and stuff like that. And I've probably done it 2 or 3 times in my adulthood and just been like, well, where is so-and-so? Oh yeah, they're, oh, where's so-and-so? Nah, yeah, they're not, and it's just like, oh, jail and this and that. And not everybody, but it is also nice, like you said, to see those, not only sad to see the people that didn't make it out, but it's comforting to see the ones who did. Yeah. It's nice to see the ones who were able to build from there.
Yeah, I agree. Dennis, how do people get a hold of you if they want to learn more about what you're doing?
Simply website if you're interested in the product and the marketing ecosystem that we're doing right now, thelegalpodcastnetwork.com. If you're not legal and you're listening to this anytime in 2026 onward, we should at least at the bottom of our page sometime in January or so have a click through to like Authority Podcast Network, which is more national and international. That's where Authority stands. And then Expert is more of a local level. I'm a real estate expert. I'm a local, mortgage expert, that sort of thing. So we're creating the Expert Network and the Authority Network. And so they can also look there. For me personally, LinkedIn's a great place. Dennis Meador, Meador. I'm sure it'll be in the notes here as well. Mm-hmm. And so, that's the best way. Just reach me those 2.
I appreciate the conversation very much. Very enlightening. Like I said, I could go on forever. I love a good conversation. And we just met. And I think the one thing that you said that stood out that I don't think enough about is I literally can sit down anywhere at any point, meet anybody about anything, and an hour later, my wife will go, "Are we going to go?" And I'm like, "Well, I met Mike here, and he's got a fantastic story." So you and I, 100%, you hit that on the head.